It was supposed to be a quiet summer, just me, the farm, and the silence my father left behind. But everything changed the day Eli Carter showed up with dust on his boots and a past he wouldn't talk about. He said he just wanted work, but I could tell he was running from something, the kind of secret that doesn't stay buried forever. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, two men found themselves sharing the same land, the same heat, and eventually, something neither of them was ready to admit. But the truth is, some feelings grow faster than corn in July, and once they take root, there's no going back. Because on this farm, desire wasn't the only thing hidden under the surface, and when the truth finally came out, it threatened to destroy us both. If you believe love can bloom in the unlikeliest places, even between two men bound by fear and silence, stay with me, because this story isn't just about the farm. It's about secrets, longing, and what happens when the heart refuses to obey the rules. The sun had burned the sky raw that summer. By noon, the air shimmered over the fields, and the smell of dry grass hung so thick it almost tasted like dust. The old farm hadn't been the same since my father passed. The fences leaned like tired soldiers, the barn roof sagged, and the house echoed with too much quiet. I kept it all running out of guilt more than pride. Maybe because it was the only thing left of him, or maybe because I didn't know who I was without this place. I was halfway through repairing the chicken coop when I saw the truck. It was an old Ford, the kind you could tell had lived 1,000 hard miles. The tires kicked up a wave of dust as it crawled down the long dirt road to the gate. I didn't recognize it, and out here that meant caution. Visitors were rare, strangers rarer. I wiped the sweat from my neck and waited. The door creaked open. He stepped out slow, like the heat had weight. Tall, broad shoulders, tan skin beneath a white shirt, stuck to him by sweat. He looked younger than me, maybe late 20s. His jeans were worn to the thread, boots scuffed and cracked. A canvas duffel lay in the truck bed, the kind you keep when you don't plan on staying anywhere long, you the owner. He asked, voice low, a little rough like he hadn't used it much lately. Yeah, I said. Name's Jack, who's asking? He hesitated. Eli, I heard in town you might be looking for help. I wasn't, not really, but I was behind on everything. Fence posts, feed orders, even the bank payments. I needed hands, even if I didn't want company. You got any experience? I asked. He gave a short nod. Ranch work. Wyoming mostly. Fixing, building. Whatever needs doing. Something in his eyes caught me. Calm, steady, but tired. Like he'd been through storms most people wouldn't survive. I didn't know why, but I trusted him instantly, and that scared me. Fine, I said. There's a spare room in the barn loft. You can start tomorrow. Pay's not great. I'm not here for money, he replied almost under his breath. That should have been my first warning. The next morning, he was already outside before sunrise. By the time I got my boots on, I could hear the rhythmic slam of a hammer from the southern fence line. He moved like a man trying to outrun something invisible, fast, precise, relentless. I watched from the porch, coffee cooling in my hands. His shirt clung to his back, muscles working in quiet rhythm, the early light cutting across him like a film reel I couldn't stop watching. At lunch, I brought him water. You work like the devil's chasing you, I said. He smirked, the first hint of a smile I'd seen. Maybe he is. The answer hung between us longer than it should have. That evening, the sky turned the color of rust. I was repairing a tractor belt when he walked into the barn, wiping sweat from his neck. He didn't speak at first, just leaned against a post, looking around like he belonged there. The silence stretched until it wasn't comfortable anymore. You ever stop? I asked. He raised a brow. Stop what? Running. Whatever it is you're running from. He looked down, hands tightening around the rag. You don't want to know. He was right, but I did. More than I should have. When he finally looked up, our eyes met. There was something raw there. Loneliness, guilt, maybe recognition. It hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, neither of us moved. Just the hum of crickets and the sound of our breathing in the heavy air. Then he broke the silence. You ever get tired of pretending you're fine? I froze. What makes you think I'm pretending? He gave a quiet half smile. Because I am too. Days turned into weeks. We barely talked, but silence started to feel like its own language. He'd fix fences, I'd feed the horses, and somewhere between chores we'd exchange glances that lingered too long. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me from across the field, eyes narrowed, expression unreadable. Once I saw him standing by the old windmill at dusk, staring at the horizon like he was waiting for someone who'd never come. One night, after a storm rolled through, the power went out. I found him in the barn, lantern light flickering across his face. He was shirtless, sweat glistening along his shoulders as he tried to patch a leak in the roof. Thunder cracked overhead. I climbed the ladder, meaning to help, but the beam creaked beneath us. He grabbed my arm to steady me, hard, firm, his palm rough against my skin. The touch froze both of us. His breath was close, the smell of rain and hay around us. The world outside drowned in thunder. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. But my voice came out wrong, too soft, too unsure. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then lightning flashed through the slats, white and sharp. He let go and climbed down fast, like the contact burned him. I stayed there, gripping the beam, heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. When I came down, he was sitting on a hay bale, staring at the rain pouring through the open door. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. "All the time," I said. "But where would I go?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me with that same unreadable gaze, like he wanted to say something but couldn't, and that's when I saw it. The letter. A folded piece of paper tucked halfway into his duffel bag, with my father's name written on it. My chest went cold. I stepped closer. "Why do you have that?" He froze, eyes wide, then turned away. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Eli?" He didn't speak, just grabbed the bag and walked out into the rain. And in that moment I realized I had no idea who the hell he really was. I didn't sleep that night. Every time thunder rattled the windows, I saw his face again, the look of panic when I said my father's name. It made no sense. My father had been gone for 6 months. He'd barely known anyone outside town. And this man, this stranger who'd wandered into my life from the back roads of nowhere, somehow had a letter with his name on it. By dawn, the rain had stopped, leaving the fields soaked and the sky heavy with clouds that hadn't decided what to do next. Eli's truck was still parked by the barn, but he wasn't inside. His duffel was gone. I walked out barefoot across the mud, calling his name once. Nothing. The silence felt like an answer I didn't want. He'd left me and taken my peace with him. By noon, the sun came out, drying the ground, but not the unease in my chest. I checked the house, the sheds, even down by the river. He was gone. Only his work remained. The fixed fences, the clean troughs, the mended gates. Like he'd come to repair the place and disappear before I could ask what he was really fixing. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. But the truth was it did. It mattered more than I could admit. Because for the first time since my father died, I'd started to feel something again. Not happiness, but movement, life, and he'd taken that with him that night. I found the letter. It had slipped out of his bag and fallen between the hay bales. The envelope was damp, edges wrinkled, ink smeared but still legible. To Mr. Samuel Rowe. My father's handwriting, clear as daylight. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single folded page, and 3 words scrawled in dark pencil. "I forgive you." No signature. No explanation. I stared at it until the lantern ran out of fuel. My father was a hard man, not cruel, but distant. The kind of man who loved through discipline and silence. He didn't forgive easily, whoever this was meant for. It wasn't me. Eli came back the next morning. I heard the truck before I saw him. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just stepped into the yard like he belonged there again. His shirt was wet, hair stuck to his forehead, boots caked with mud. He looked like a man who'd been driving all night and lost whatever fight he'd been having with himself. "I didn't steal anything," he said. His voice was low but steady. "That letter, it was meant for me." I froze. "You knew my father?" He nodded slowly. "A long time ago. Before he came back here. Before the farm." I felt my pulse in my throat. "How? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it didn't matter. I wasn't here for that. Then why are you here, Eli? He exhaled, looking away. Because I didn't know how else to make it right. We stood there, the morning quiet, except for the wind moving through the dry cornstalks. I didn't know what make it right meant, but I knew I wasn't ready to let him walk away again. Sit down, I said finally. He hesitated, then followed me to the porch. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Your father saved my life once, 15 years ago in Montana. I was just a kid, 16 maybe. He caught me stealing from his truck. He could have called the cops, but he didn't. He gave me food, some cash, told me to get my act together. That letter was from him. He sent it before he died. It came late. I watched his hands, scarred, restless, strong. And you came here to, what, pay him back?" He looked up, eyes sharp and tired. "To finish what he started. He told me once I'd find peace if I worked for something honest. I figured this farm was as good a place as any. It was the truth, or close enough to sound like it. But something in his tone made me think there was more. Something unspoken. Why didn't you just say that from the start?" I asked. "Would you have believed me?" He had a point. We went back to work like nothing had happened. Days passed in uneasy silence. The air between us changed, heavier, charged with things we couldn't name. Sometimes I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes our hands brushed over the same tool, and neither of us moved away fast enough. One night, I found him sitting by the river, shirt unbuttoned, cigarette glowing between his fingers. The moon was full, throwing silver across his face. "You don't have to keep hiding it," I said. He turned his head slightly. "Hiding what? That you're not here just because of my father." He flicked the cigarette into the water, eyes never leaving mine. "You think too much. Maybe. Or maybe I just notice what's right in front of me." The silence stretched, long enough to make my heart beat louder than the river. Then he said quietly, "You don't know what you're getting into." "Jack, then tell me." He didn't. Instead he stood, stepped close enough that I could feel the heat of him, and said, "Some things are better left buried." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the moonlight, trembling with questions I didn't know how to ask. The next morning, I found the sheriff's truck parked outside the gate. Sheriff McAdams leaned out the window, hat pulled low. "You got a man working here?" "Name's Eli Carter." "Yeah," I said slowly. "Why?" His jaw tightened. "You might want to keep an eye on him. He's been running from more than just his past." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, hard and serious. "There was a fire in Montana, years back. A man died. Eli was there when it happened, and he's been on the move ever since." Before I could speak, he tipped his hat and drove off, dust trailing behind him like smoke. I turned toward the barn. Eli was standing in the doorway watching. He'd heard everything. The sheriff's words stayed with me long after the truck disappeared down the road. A fire, a dead man, and Eli Carter standing right there watching me as the dust settled. Jaw tight, eyes unreadable, shoulders set like he'd been waiting for this moment. I didn't move. Neither did he. For a long stretch, we just stared at each other across the yard, two men tied by something neither of us had asked for. Finally, he said quietly, "Guess you know now." I took a step forward. "Guess I don't know much of anything." He looked down, kicked the dirt once, then met my eyes again. "It wasn't what he said." "Then tell me what it was," I said, voice sharper than I meant. "Because right now it sounds like you ran from something ugly." He didn't flinch. "I ran from a mistake, one that cost someone their life." The air seemed to thin around us. We walked into the barn, out of sight of the road. He leaned against a post, head bowed, hands fidgeting with the strap of his duffel bag. "I was working at a ranch in Billings," he said slowly. "The boss's son, Tyler, was trouble. Mean when he drank, and he drank a lot. One night he got into it with another ranch hand. I tried to pull them apart. There was a lantern, it fell, and by the time I got him out, the barn was already burning." He stopped. The silence filled with the sound of horses shifting in their stalls. "He died a week later. Smoke inhalation. They said I started it. Sheriff didn't care about the truth. He just needed someone to blame." I looked at him for a long moment, searching for something. Guilt, fear, maybe a lie. But all I saw was exhaustion. "You didn't do it." "I don't know anymore," he said. "Maybe I did. Maybe trying to stop it was the same as causing it." Something in his voice cracked on those last words, and before I realized it, I was standing closer than I should have been. His eyes were glassy, his jaw trembling slightly, the first sign of weakness I'd seen from him since he arrived. "You could have told me," I said softly. He gave a small, bitter laugh. "Would you have let me stay if I had?" I didn't answer. That night, the storm returned. Thunder rolled across the hills, and wind rattled the windows hard enough to make the walls groan. I found him in the barn again, shirt off, patching a tarp over the hayloft leak. "Couldn't sleep," he said when he noticed me. "Storm like this always gets to me." "Why?" Reminds me of that night. The lantern between us flickered, throwing light across his chest, his arms, his face drawn tight with memory. I climbed the ladder, meaning to help, but he caught my wrist mid-step. "You don't have to," he said. "I want to." His grip loosened. Slowly, I climbed the rest of the way, water dripping from the roof onto the boards. We worked in silence, the air charged with thunder and something heavier. The kind of tension that's half fear, half need. When the tarp was finally secured, we stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath. The storm outside felt miles away. "You shouldn't look at me like that," he said quietly. "Like what?" "Like you don't care what I've done." I swallowed hard. "Maybe I don't." His eyes darkened, his voice low. "You should." But he didn't move away. Neither did I. Lightning flashed through the slats, lighting up his face, every scar, every bruise of memory etched into it. I could smell the rain on his skin, the heat of him cutting through the cold air. I don't know who moved first, only that suddenly his hand was on my neck and mine was gripping the back of his shirt. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't planned, it was desperation. Two men trying to forget the world for just 1 second. The kiss was rough at first, all breath and trembling and the sound of rain pounding the roof. Then softer, like we both realized what it meant at the same time. When we finally broke apart, neither of us could speak. The lantern hissed, wind howled, and the silence between us said everything words couldn't. He stepped back first, eyes wide, chest rising fast. "This can't happen," he said, voice shaking. "You don't understand what it means for me, for you. I don't care. You will." He grabbed his jacket and climbed down the ladder, boots echoing on the wood. "Eli," I started, but he was already gone. I sat there for a long time, listening to the storm die out. My hands still trembled, my lips still burned. By the time I made it back to the house, dawn was just a grey smear on the horizon. I thought I'd find him gone again, but his truck was still there, parked under the tree, engine cold. Through the window, I could see him in the driver's seat, head resting against the wheel like a man who'd lost every reason to leave but couldn't stay either. I stepped outside, but before I could reach him, he started the engine. "Eli, wait." He looked at me once through the windshield. Then he drove off, dust trailing behind him in the weak morning light. The following days blurred into one another. Work felt hollow, every sound louder than it should be. His absence filled the place louder than his presence ever had. I tried to forget, but the memory of that night played in endless loops. The heat, the taste of rain, the way he said you will. On the 5th day, the mail arrived. Among the bills and bank notices was a brown envelope with my name scrawled in rough handwriting. No return address. I tore it open. Inside was a single photo, my father and Eli, standing together by the old barn in Montana. My father's arm around his shoulders, both of them smiling, and on the back in faded pencil, "For the boy who reminded me what mercy looks like." My knees went weak. I didn't understand the message, not yet. But I knew one thing. Eli hadn't told me everything, and I wasn't going to let him disappear until I knew the truth. The photo wouldn't leave my hands. I must have stared at it for an hour. My father and Eli, both younger, both smiling in a way that felt too real to be chance. The edges were cracked, water-stained, maybe carried too long in a pocket. My father's arm rested on his shoulder, like they shared something deeper than obligation. But what? I'd thought Eli was a stranger. Turns out he was the one piece of my father's past that refused to stay buried. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the farmhouse made me think I heard the sound of Eli's truck pulling back up the road. Every flash of heat lightning reminded me of his hands, his voice, his warning. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to find him. The nearest town was 30 miles of cracked highway and silence. His trail wasn't hard to follow. People remembered him. At the diner, the waitress with the red hair told me, "Yeah, tall guy, quiet, eyes like a storm. Came through 2 days ago. Ate a pie, tipped heavy, didn't say where he was headed." At the gas station, an old man pointed west. "He's working over at the Miller Ranch. Needed cash bad, I reckon. Didn't say much, but he's a good hand. Hard worker." By dusk, I was standing at the end of a dirt road, lined with sycamores. The Miller Ranch spread wide and gold in the falling light. Horses moved in the fields. I saw him by the barn, hammer in hand, like nothing had changed. When he finally looked up, he froze. The hammer slipped from his fingers. "Jack," I didn't say anything, just held up the photo. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the day he left. "You shouldn't have come." "Then tell me why this exists," I said, my voice louder than I meant. "Tell me why my father called you the boy who reminded him what mercy looks like." He looked away, jaw tight. "It's not what you think." "Then make me understand, Eli." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the barn. "Not here." We went inside. Dust floated in the sunlight, cutting through the slats. It smelled like hay and diesel, sharp and dry. He sat on a hay bale, elbows on his knees, like a man too tired to carry another lie. "Your father and I—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "He took me in after that fire. Everyone thought I'd run, but he found me hiding in an abandoned rail car. He said if I stayed, I'd rot from the guilt. So he brought me to his place, made me work the land, treated me like a son when no one else would. I could barely breathe." "You lived with him?" "For about a year, until he got sick. He told me if anything ever happened, I should come here. Said there'd be something I needed to face." He met my eyes. "You?" My stomach twisted. "Me? Why?" "Because you remind me of him," he said quietly. "Same stubbornness, same loneliness, same way of pretending you don't need anyone." The words hit harder than I expected. He continued, "I never meant to lie. Jack, I didn't know how to explain without you hating me for it." "I don't hate you," I said too fast. He looked up, eyes soft. "You should." The barn door creaked open then, a shadow in the sunlight. Sheriff McAdams stepped inside, hand resting on his belt. "Mind if I interrupt?" he said. Eli stood. "How'd you find me?" "Didn't take much. Word travels fast when someone with your record starts turning up again." I moved between them. "He didn't do anything." The sheriff's gaze flicked to me. "You don't know what he's done, son." "Then tell me," I said. McAdams sighed. "There was more to that fire than what he told you. The man who died, Tyler, wasn't just some drunk ranch hand. He was my nephew." Eli's face went white. The sheriff took a step forward. "You didn't just get in the way that night, Carter. You threw the lantern." "That's a lie," Eli said, voice shaking. "I tried to stop him." "I got witnesses," the sheriff snapped. "And I got a reason to make sure you finally pay for it." He reached for his cuffs. I moved without thinking, standing in front of Eli. "You're not taking him. Get out of the way." "Jack, he's not the man you think he is," I said. "He's been working here, helping people, fixing what's broken, like he fixed my nephew." The room fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop outside. Eli's hand brushed my arm, a quiet, desperate gesture. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let him." I turned to him, furious. "No, you don't get to disappear again. You don't get to run this time." His eyes locked on mine. "Then come with me." It happened fast. The sheriff reached out. Eli shoved the door open. A cloud of dust exploded around us as he ran out toward the fields. McAdams cursed and followed, hand on his holster. I ran after them both. The sun was sinking low, painting everything blood red. Eli darted between the rows of corn, the sheriff shouting behind him. I caught up just as they reached the fence line. McAdams grabbed Eli's arm and they struggled, stumbling against the wire. "Stop!" I yelled. "Stop, damn it!" Eli twisted free, chest heaving. The sheriff raised his gun, not aiming but close enough to make my heart stop. "Put it down!" I screamed. McAdams hesitated, but Eli stepped forward slowly, palms out. "You want me?" he said. "Then take me, but leave him out of it." The sheriff lowered the gun slightly. "You gonna come quiet?" Eli nodded once. "Yeah, but first." He turned to me. Whatever he was about to say was lost when the ground gave way beneath him, the old irrigation ditch collapsing with the rain-soaked earth. I lunged forward, caught his hand just in time. "Don't let go!" I shouted, his grip tightened, mud sliding between our fingers. "Jack," he said, voice breaking. "If I fall, let me. You don't owe me anything. I'm not letting you go." He looked up at me then. Really looked, eyes filled with something between love and resignation. "You already have." The ground shifted again. His hand slipped, and then he was gone. I dropped to my knees, screaming his name into the wind. The sheriff called for backup, but I barely heard him. The sun disappeared behind the hills, and the farm went dark again, and for the first time, I realized what the photo meant. What my father had seen in Eli: mercy, the kind you only understand when it's too late. They found him at dawn. The sheriff's men searched all night, their flashlights cutting through the rain-soaked fields like ghostly stars. I stayed by the ditch until morning, soaked, shaking, refusing to leave. When they finally pulled him out, he was alive, barely. Mud covered half his face. His arm hung limp at his side. But his chest was moving, slow and shallow. The paramedics loaded him into the back of a pickup because the nearest hospital was 40 miles away. Sheriff McAdams stood by the road, hat in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time, he looked unsure, like maybe he'd spent too long chasing a version of the truth that didn't exist. I climbed into the truck bed beside Eli, holding his hand the whole way to town. His pulse fluttered weakly against my fingers. Every bump on the road made him groan, but he never opened his eyes. "Hang on," I whispered. "Just hang on." He spent 3 days in the county hospital. Broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, and a concussion bad enough to keep him drifting in and out of consciousness. I barely left his side. The nurses stopped asking who I was after the first night. Sometimes he'd wake up halfway, eyes cloudy, lips moving like he was somewhere else. Once he muttered my father's name. Another time he said, "I never meant to burn it all down." When he finally woke fully, it was dawn again. The room smelled like antiseptic and coffee. He turned his head toward me, eyes half open. "Guess I'm still here," he said weakly. "Barely," I said. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "You should have let go. I told you I wouldn't." He stared at the ceiling. "That's what scares me." Later that morning, the sheriff came. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He stood at the foot of the bed, hat twisting in his hands. "You're lucky to be breathing, Carter," he said. "The ditch collapsed another foot after we pulled you. You'd have been gone." Eli didn't answer. McAdams sighed. I checked the old case file. "Talk to a man who was there that night in Billings." He told me something I never heard before. He looked at me, then back at Eli. "Tyler, my nephew, started that fire. He was drunk, waving a lantern at one of the workers. You tried to stop him. Guess he knocked it out of your hands." Eli's jaw tightened. "Doesn't change that he died." "No," the sheriff said quietly. "But it changes what kind of man you are." He set the hat back on his head. "Charges are dropped. You're free to go when the doctor says you can." Then he turned and left. Eli lay silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "Free to go," he said. "That's funny." "What do you mean?" He looked at me. "I haven't felt free in 15 years. When he got discharged, I drove him back to the farm. The fields had started to bloom again, small green shoots pushing through cracked soil. Life refusing to stay dead. He moved slow, favoring his left arm, but insisted on walking to the barn first. "I need to see it," he said. Inside, the air smelled of hay and summer heat. Dust motes spun through sunlight, cutting the darkness in thin golden lines. He sat on the same hay bale where he'd told me his story weeks before. This place, he said softly. It's quieter now, like it forgave me before I did. I leaned against the post beside him. You could stay, work the land with me. We could. He looked up fast, eyes searching mine. Don't say it. Why not? Because you don't know what that would mean. I stepped closer. I know exactly what it means. He stood, jaw trembling. No, you don't. You think it's simple. 2 men on a farm, no one around to care. But people do care, Jack. They always do. And when they find out, I don't care about them. He turned away. You should. I reached for him, hand brushing his shoulder. He didn't move. Eli, I said quietly, I almost lost you once. I'm not pretending it didn't happen. I'm not pretending I don't. He turned suddenly, eyes wet, voice cracking. Don't say you love me. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. He walked out of the barn and into the fields. I followed him to the fence line where the wind carried the faint scent of rain. I don't deserve that kind of love, he said. You don't get to decide that for me. He laughed bitterly. You sound like your father. Maybe that's a good thing, he shook his head. He believed in forgiveness. I'm not sure I do. Then maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just have to let someone else believe it for you. He looked at me for a long time, the kind of look that says everything words can't. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Not the half smile I'd seen before, but something real, tired and warm. You're impossible, he said softly. Yeah, so stay for a few weeks. He did. We worked side by side again, quieter this time, gentler. When he laughed, it was softer. When he looked at me, he didn't look away so fast. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't talk about the kiss. But every time our shoulders brushed, every time his hand lingered a moment too long, it said enough. And then one morning, he was gone. His duffel was missing. The truck was gone. Only a note left on the kitchen table, written in that same rough handwriting I'd seen on my father's letter. Jack, you saved my life twice. That's 2 more times than I deserved. Don't wait for me. The world's too small for men like us, and I've already taken too much of your peace. Take care of the farm. Take care of yourself. I sat there reading it over and over until the paper blurred. Outside, the wind moved through the wheat, whispering like footsteps fading down a long road. That night, I found the old photograph again. I pinned it to the barn wall beside the lantern he'd fixed. 2 faces, one past, one memory. My father once called him the boy who reminded me what mercy looks like. Now I understood. Mercy wasn't forgiveness. It was the choice to love someone even knowing they might leave, and I had made it. A year passed before the fields turned green again. The rain came late that spring, slow at first, then heavy enough to drown the dust that had clung to everything since Eli left. I rebuilt most of the fences myself, planted new seed, repaired the roof. The farm looked alive, but I didn't. Not really. There were mornings I'd wake expecting to hear his boots on the porch, or the low hum of him singing under his breath while he worked. Instead, there was only the wind, the sound of the old windmill creaking, the dog barking at nothing. Sometimes I'd talk to him anyway, just in case he could hear me wherever he was. Fence held through the storm, I'd say. Or you were right about the irrigation line. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of words that used to pass between us without meaning anything, and now meant everything. In town, they talked about me like I was half ghost. People said I'd lost too much, my father, my future, my mind. Maybe they were right. The farm wasn't just my home anymore. It was the only piece of the past I could still hold. Then one afternoon in late June, I drove into town for supplies. At the diner, the waitress handed me a folded newspaper. You might want to see this, she said quietly. It was a local paper from 2 counties over. On the second page, near the bottom, a photo, grainy and small, of a man standing in front of a rebuilt barn. Former drifter helps rebuild community. Center after wildfire. The name beneath it made my hands shake. Eli Carter that drove the long way home that evening. Down back roads glowing gold in the setting sun. Every mile felt like both a wound and a promise. He was alive, not running anymore. That night I dreamed of him. We were standing by the river, the same one where the sheriff's men had found him half dead. He looked different, older maybe, but his eyes were steady. He said, "You kept the farm going." I said, "You found peace." Then he smiled and said, "Maybe those were the same thing." I woke up with tears drying on my face. By the end of summer, the farm was thriving. The wheat rose tall, the air smelled sweet again. I'd hired a couple of hands to help with harvest, 2 young guys who laughed too loud and worked too slow, but the noise helped. It made the silence less sharp. Sometimes they'd ask about the old framed photo on the barn wall, my father and Eli side by side. "That your dad? One of them asked once." "Yeah," I said. Then after a pause, "And someone he saved." I didn't explain further. Some stories don't need retelling. They just need remembering. In early autumn, I got a letter. The handwriting was familiar, rough, uneven. No return address, just a single line across the front. To Jack Rowe. I read it by lamplight, heart pounding so hard I almost couldn't focus. "Jack, I told myself I'd stay gone. I thought it'd make things easier for both of us. But the truth is, leaving didn't erase anything. It just made me realize what home actually was. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I think maybe you already did, in your own way. I just wanted you to know I kept your father's words. I stopped running. I started building again. I thought maybe that's what mercy really meant. If you ever find yourself near Riverton, there's a place on Maple Road with a blue door and a field behind it. Knock once, and I'll know it's you." The paper trembled in my hands. Riverton was less than 2 hours away. I sat there for a long time, staring at that last line. The lantern flickered, the house creaked, and all the ghosts that had lived there with me seemed to go quiet, like they were waiting for my answer. The next morning, I loaded the truck. No second thoughts, no plans, just instinct. The kind that comes when you've run out of reasons to keep pretending you're fine. The road to Riverton wound through fields the color of old honey. The sun hung low, painting everything in amber. I passed small towns, broken barns, and roads that looked like the ones from my past, every mile peeling away a layer of guilt I didn't know I still carried. When I reached Maple Road, I almost drove past it. It wasn't a house that looked like much, just a small place with chipped paint and a porch swing moving in the wind. But the door was blue, exactly like he'd said. I parked, stepped out, and walked up the gravel path, knocked once. The door opened before the sound even faded. He looked the same, maybe a little thinner, a little more sunburned, but his eyes, they were still the same storm grey I remembered. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, and said, "You really did come." I nodded. "You really did stop running." We stood there in the doorway, the silence between us filled with all the things we didn't need to say. Then he stepped aside. "You want to come in?" I hesitated just long enough to see the faint tremor in his hand. Then I smiled. "Yeah, I think I do." Inside, it smelled like sawdust and coffee. A photo hung on the wall, the same one of him and my father, but cleaner framed. Beside it, a new one, Eli standing with a group of kids holding shovels. The caption beneath it reading, "Community Build 2025. He saw me looking. "They needed help after the fires last year," he said. Felt like the right thing. I turned toward him. It always was. He gave me that quiet half smile I'd once mistaken for sadness. "You still talk too much, and you still walk away too easily." He looked at me for a long time. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, "Not this time." The air between us shifted, like the world exhaled. Outside, the wind brushed through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. The same sound that had once nearly destroyed us now felt like something alive, something forgiving. He stepped closer. His hand brushed mine, soft, deliberate, real, and for the first time in a long time I didn't flinch.